Welcome to Let's Be Well Together podcast. You're in the right place, the perfect place, if you're looking for a wellness check-in team whose goal is to remind you to think about wellness and encourage you to make wellness a priority. It all stems from my book, Accidentally Well.
Welcome to episode 32.
A territorial acknowledgement improves allyship with Indigenous people. As part of a reconciliation process, we make our podcast from lands located within the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, and Haudenosaunee peoples. We acknowledge the presence and traditional knowledge, laws, and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land. We are treaty people, responsible to honor the original caretakers and to serve as stewards for the land.
We're back again for another episode of Let's Be Well Together. I'm Julie Wilson, and I'm going to ask John today about his poetry skills.
Well, so I do have one poem in my book.
I love that poem. It's called Sitting by the Ocean.
Right. And I'll explain how it came about. But in terms of poetry, so I've written about 6 poems in my life.
Probably 4 of those when you were between the ages of 5 and 10 in school.
I probably wrote lots of them back then, but I mean as an adult.
Right.
And most shall remain buried. But this one was interesting because I was talking about why artistic wellness is important to me. I mentioned that I'm not actually much of an artist, but this really strange experience happened to me. We were on a trip in Ireland, and we had this amazing place that was right on the ocean.
Oh, very nice.
I woke up before everybody one day, and I walked down, and there was a bit of a beach, and there was these rocks that jutted out into the water, so you could kind of go sit on these big rocks. And I've always loved the sound of water. Mm-hmm. It kind of speaks to me in a way. I'm not sure why, but it's calming and interesting. I feel like nature's talking to me. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't know.
No, there's something about water that the sound of it, just the ocean sounds or the trickling sounds of a river, there is nothing better than just listening to that. There's such a calming sensation.
Yeah, it really is amazing. And so I pulled out my camera because I saw this really cool picture. The waves were coming in a certain way. But of course, my camera was my iPhone.
Right.
And all of a sudden, it just occurred to me that I had an idea to write a poem. And what I did was I just started typing on my iPhone, thinking that it would be the skeleton, because any other time I wrote a poem, I would put a thought on paper. And then it literally took months for me to kind of refine it and fix the words. At least you
wrote a poem. I have never written a poem in my life.
And even when I was done, they were kind of rudimentary. But nonetheless, Anyway, what's crazy about this one is I wrote it, and this is what came out. So I haven't changed anything. It all happened within like 10 minutes. So it's called Sitting by the Ocean. Where in the ocean does a wave begin? One after another opens its journey towards shore. Whether it has a purpose or knows its purpose, the wave rolls forward towards the distant landfall, twists and turns along the way, meeting and mingling with other waves, rising and falling with the wind and the swells, and conditions beyond its control, moving ever forward. How far it will travel is unknown. Some travel shorter distances and land at low tide. Some roll gently up beaches and slide back softly down the sand. Others crash headlong to the rocks and leap in the air, to turn into mist or fall back down. After the journey, although the wave is no more, its essence goes on by rejoining the ocean or moistening the earth or the air. And somewhere in the ocean, another wave begins its journey. So there you go.
It just, it speaks to our existence, life.
It does in a way. I mean, I'm not going to present it as an answer to anything. It's more of a question.
No, yeah.
It's a question, but like a lot of us go through these thoughts, like I keep moving forward in time. What's it all about?
To me, it speaks of hope.
How do you see that? I mean, because it's interesting too, like when you write down something, you might have a certain meaning, but when someone reads it,
it means something different. It means
something totally different, which is the most amazing thing about art. Like an artist makes a painting and then hears from other people what they take from it. So I am curious, like, how do you feel? Is it just a feeling? How do you see the hope coming?
To me, there's a hope that there's always going to be more waves. So there's always going to be, something that is happening in the future. It's more of a feeling, but it's that there will be another wave, right? There will be other good times. Almost like this too shall pass and we'll carry on, and it might be bigger, better, it might be a little smaller, but I don't know. It really touched me, and I get a sense of it was just a really good feeling through that poem, and I can't believe that you just sat down and wrote that, and it's beautiful.
I can't believe it either. It's weird. I actually wrote it in the book. There was a little book at the front of the place we were staying where people could say, I'm from, North Carolina. I'm from Toronto, whatever.
Right.
So who knows? Somebody out there has read it and wondering, what's all this about?
Well, and don't they talk about on your wellness journey, and again, you talk about a journey in the poem, don't they talk about in wellness journeys that sometimes, journaling, writing down your thoughts, maybe this was just at the moment, you needed to write down your thoughts, and it came out in the form of a poem, things that were meaningful to you at the time, like water and what you were seeing at the time. I don't know. I'm guessing at that, but part of journey, and that's one of the strategies that works for some people is writing their thoughts down or journaling.
I think, but again, I don't actually see this as part of a kind of search for wellness. What I see it more as is, again, we've talked about resilience. We've talked about building up these different categories to provide strength and protection. And I think it was Sandy McFarlane, who's a comedian, who said that I'm not very good at painting and that kind of stuff, but when I do it, it really makes me feel good. And Sammy gave an example of a story of Cambodia, when a lot of children, after the horrible things that happened there, were having a hard time coming to grips with things. And they started a program where they could do art. That somehow just
art therapy.
Doing the art therapy helped them move forward. And I guess the point, if there is one, by including that, is just saying, letting yourself get in touch with art, your artistic side, just trying it, even if you're no good at it. It develops something in you, and it makes you see things in a different way, and it takes you to a different place. And all this can be really rich and rewarding and make your life experience better. And
you can share it with others, and it makes their life a little bit.
Some of them you can share with others. I can tell you that.
It takes 6 months to write.
When I was writing my book, accidentally,
it's a good book.
When I was getting it edited, you get a whole bunch of notes back from the editor, and my editor was unbelievable. He was amazing. His name was Darren. When he got to that, he just had a little note that said, "Whoa, you're really putting yourself out there." And I was like, yeah, maybe too much.
But I said to you at one point in time that you have to put more of yourself into the book, right? And more of your feelings and more of your, and maybe this is an indirect way of doing that.
Maybe. I just know that it just kind of, I really want to drive home the fact that, because I don't see artistic wellness written up much, although there's more and more articles coming up about it.
Yes.
And I talked to Shirley Medill from the Kitchen Waterloo Art Gallery, and she says she was talking about countless articles and programs. Mm-hmm. It's becoming more popular, but it's largely unknown. And so that's the big point I'm trying to make. When you're thinking about wellness, expand your mind in terms of what your areas of wellness are and what enriches your wellness. We all tend to pigeonhole it into 3, 4, 5 things, mental, physical, spiritual, and
that's true.
Pick a couple others. And I really want to emphasize that, hey, think about artistic wellness, whether you want to enjoy music or art, whether you want to try it. It's a huge contributing factor and will hopefully help develop strength and enjoyment.
I was reading an article about music, and maybe this is a topic for another day, but I came across a lot of orchestras, choirs are doing what's called a relaxed performance, where for individuals who, maybe on the neurodiversity spectrum, that these concerts are for, and it's not even neurodiverse individuals, but it's also mothers with children who can't experience a regular performance because otherwise they'd be told to leave because their children are crying, or if they are neurodiverse. You know, certain sounds might trigger, they may not be able to stay quiet for an hour or so, but music therapy in this article I was reading was talking a little about some of these what they call relaxed performances, and how they're finding it's beneficial for individuals and for their mental health, and allowing them to experience concerts that they might not otherwise get to experience.
You know, it's so crazy. Again, like, I didn't think of things for so long as being connected to wellness. Now, you know, maybe in fairness, people weren't talking about overall wellness very much decades ago when we were younger. But, you know, music has always been probably the most important source of something that can affect me in a good way or bring me out of something.
Or make you sad. Like, really, music is something so tied to emotions, right?
Yeah. And I mean, it's just such a huge part of my overall frame of mind and wellness. And I didn't even pick up on it. I didn't pick up on it expressly.
Right.
Until I started to think about what my categories of wellness are. And it's like, what the heck? Like, how did you let that happen? I think a lot of people would say, well, dummy, I knew that when I was 2 years old. Unfortunately, I wasn't one of those people. So that's the message we're trying to get across. Part
of your journey. And that wave finally made it up to the beach, up to the shore, right?
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Guests are giving their time, expanding our minds. Today we are talking the area of spiritual wellness, and I'm talking to Simon Adler, who used to live in KW, but he now splits his time between Canada and Israel. And I think that's for grandchildren reasons?
Yes.
Okay, well, welcome, Simon. Thanks a lot. We are trying to connect with people from different religious outlooks and beliefs. And my sister-in-law said, why don't you talk to Simon Adler? He's a member of the Jewish faith, and he has some interesting things to say, including about kashrut. And he had given his time to speak to students from time to time at high schools to explain different things. Welcome. And if I could just ask you at a high level, can you tell us, for those of us who don't know anything about kashrut and kosher food, can you just explain it a little bit about that at a high level?
I'll certainly try to. I want to begin by saying I'm not an authority and don't have any authoritative right or wrong answers. But generally speaking, my understanding is like this. In the ideal world, humans were intended to be vegetarians. That's the Garden of Eden, period. After the flood and Noah, humans were given permission to eat meat. With the advent of Judaism, particularly with the revelation of the Torah at Sinai, all kinds of rules and regulations were created around the eating of meats and other foods. The primary intent being probably to connect eating with spirituality and understanding that all food is a gift. The primary restriction that most people will have some vague familiarity with is that we don't eat pig. Now, that's a small portion of a much larger rule that says that any mammal that's going to be eaten has to have both a cloven hoof, a split hoof, and chew its cud, so that pigs fail on at least one of those accounts. As do dogs, cats, and any number of other animals. There are a large number of animals that have one and not the other. They're all forbidden. The second point about dealing with mammals is that they have to be humanely killed. And so there are very traditional ways involving an extremely sharpened knife that slits the throat painlessly. Birds are a slightly different situation. They also have to be killed painlessly, but we're limited to eating birds that are not on a prescribed list set out in the Bible, and birds that are not predators or carrion eaters. So effectively, chickens, ducks, geese, that kind of bird, and they have to be killed, again, in a ritually proper way. Fish, real fish with fins and scales can be eaten. That eliminates things like lobsters, shrimps, cuttlefish, and octopus, and other things that people may find as delicacies. The whole point of this probably being to require people to think about their food as connected to spirituality, and not just as something to satisfy your animal instincts. Now, once the choice of food has been limited, how it's prepared is also limited. As I mentioned, animals must be killed in an extremely painless fashion set by tradition, but the Jews only eat from the front half of beef cows and bulls as an allusion to an incident which took place in the Bible. We don't really need to go into it just at the moment for this high level discussion, but just understand that when a cow is butchered in a kosher manner, only the front half is used and the back half is sold off to others who are prepared to use it. But when we get into the kitchen, there are still more rules and regulations. For example, we're not allowed to eat the blood of an animal, so that all the meats have to be ritually cleaned and salted. It's kind of funny, people talk about brining turkeys and such like. Well, effectively, they're koshering them. They're making them kosher in a sense, except they're not killed properly usually. But animals are salted and then the blood is removed. The next big thing that you need to know is that it is prohibited as a regulation out of the Bible to mix meat and milk. Now, that's not just cooking a steak in cream. That goes to prevent any contact between any kind of dairy product and any kind of meat product. And what you often find is that in the non-kosher world, there may be chemicals used to clean equipment, used for dairy equipment, that derive from a meat-based product, a fat of some kind. And so that would render the dairy product non-kosher. I may be getting a little technical here.
No,
I don't want to get too. The bottom line you need to know is that if a kosher item says that it is neither meat nor dairy, what we call parv, you're guaranteed that there's absolutely no dairy product in there at all, nor any meat product or byproduct at all. The result of that is that very often in kosher kitchens, almost exclusively, always in kosher kitchens, you'll have two sets of cutlery, two sets of dishes, two sets of pots, two sets of pans, the whole works, because you don't want meat and milk matters to contaminate each other, as it were. The more observant people will say a blessing before and after every meal, again, recognizing that food is a gift, and that the process of eating is in some ways analogous to the process of sacrifices in the old temple before it was destroyed. So I think that's kind of the highlight. Is there something that you'd like me to
Yeah, so just a couple things. First, I'll come back to spirituality, but just as a practical matter. So in terms of everyday life, how does, for example, you're going out for supper, you're going shopping, how does it affect your kind of everyday life on a practical level?
Okay, well, for people in Kitchener, it's quite difficult to get kosher meat. The Sobeys on Iron Needles carries some frozen kosher items. Vincenzo's carries some kosher meats on special order from Hamilton. But otherwise, you pretty much have to drive to Toronto or Hamilton to find a kosher butcher. Dry goods in the modern world, cereals and things of that nature, are really quite easy. A lot of Jewish organizations provide certification marks on various products. One of the most common ones here is an oval with the letters COR. or there's a circle with a U inside it. These are very large organizations that certify that the product is kosher, and so that can be bought with great confidence. Going out to dinner is, to all intents and purposes, impractical for the very observant, because there are no certified kosher restaurants in Kitchener, and only a very comparatively few in Toronto. Many people make compromises, and so will only eat vegetarian food out, for example, or will only eat vegetarian or dairy food. But there's no restaurant. Actually, the funny thing that I'd like to say is that Kitchener did have a kosher restaurant, a certified kosher restaurant, for a very short while. It was unfortunately Krispy Kreme.
Okay.
Which is my definitive argument when people say that kashrut developed for health purposes.
Right.
If nothing else proves that it's not for health purposes, that's the one.
That you could go to Krispy Kreme.
Yeah. Krispy Kreme, at least it was when it was in Kitchener, was certified as kosher. But I mean, nobody would suggest it's healthy.
Okay, so then turning to spirituality, just in order to prepare for today, I poked around and looked at a couple of videos that I found on the internet, and they're very interesting. Like, for example, one of them was speaking about how there's a connection to the earth, because initially, as you said, in the kind of the Garden of Eden stage, it was only eating vegetables and vegetarian diet, and then because now under kashrut, you're eating cud-chewing animals who also eat vegetables, there's always this connection to the earth, and that you remember that you're dependent on nature and the earth and on God. I'm not asking you to speak, and I'm glad you pointed out that you're not an authority on the point, and I'm not asking you to speak in that capacity. But just from a personal perspective, from your view, is there a connection that you have between kashrut and spirituality?
To some degree, obviously. To the extent I keep kosher because I'm Jewish. I do so both perhaps for spiritual purposes, but also a sense of belonging. It's sort of the rules of the club, and I want to belong to the club, so I do that. A lot of Jews will participate in the rituals, participate in the obligations, participate in kashrut because that's part of what it means to be Jewish, and maybe not take it much further than that.
Yeah,
clearly, if you analyze it, that's where you have to go. You have to take it back to spirituality. I'm just saying that a lot of people would perhaps just carry on with the process, carry on with the activity, because it feels good, because it feels right, because it's part of who they are.
Yeah, and that makes sense. We were speaking on another show with a United Church minister about fasting and different, and fasting is something that's done in different religions. And one of the things that they pointed out that why people do it is because they connect with people who've done it for hundreds and even thousands of years before. So you feel like you're part of something. You feel like you're carrying on a tradition. Yeah,
and there is an argument to suggest that many of the rules related to kashrut, the detailed rules, the nitty-gritty, which tended to develop significantly after the temple was destroyed, and particularly in the Middle Ages, were in part a self-preservation differentiation from those around us, because it was a very, very difficult era in which to be Jewish, life-threatening much of the time. And so there's an argument that the rabbis developed these rules to try and keep the people cohesive, and that quite apart from any spirituality, there may have been an influence of just simple self-preservation involved in it. If we're doing the same thing at the same time, in the same way, we're more likely to remain steadfast despite the challenges. That being the theory.
That's interesting. So it's amazing time. I keep saying this on my show, time flies. We're almost up against the end. Okay. So that's a good place to break, I think. And thanks very much for that information. It was good to learn more about this practice. So there is a question I ask every guest. Our podcast is about different areas of wellness in people's lives. So my question that I ask every guest is, if you think about different areas of wellness and you think about how busy you are in your life and you can't do everything, is there one area where you think is a bit lacking right now in your life? And if so, is there even one activity you can do to foster wellness in that area?
That's an interesting and difficult question. I guess in much of my life, I see being free of illness as being wellness. I'm not sure I understand it as a specific goal of its own. So obviously at this stage, I'm doing whatever I can to avoid COVID.
Right.
And also I'm still, I think, relatively recently retired. It's been a year and a bit. And so I'm still experimenting. And at the moment, retirement feels so very good.
Oh, I'm jealous.
Yeah, I'm not prepared to say that I'm aware of anything significant lacking at the moment. It's just I'd like to do more of all of the above.
Okay, well, that's great. I appreciate that. So thanks very much for your time, Simon. And what time is it in Israel right now?
3:20 in the afternoon.
And for me, it's 20 after 8 in the morning. So
Yeah.
that's quite the time difference. So I appreciate you also taking the time with that time difference.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay.
All the best.
I'm Cameron, and welcome to another installment of The Adventures of the Starving Artist. I've got a bit of a quick story for you today. It's from ages ago, but it's a fun one. You might remember several segments ago, when spring was just coming around and things were warming up, I found myself grabbing my acoustic guitar and listening to more unplugged, laid-back music. This past week, that has changed drastically, and I've found myself listening to more electric and heavy music. Lots of hard rock and some metal stuff. And one of these bands is called Norma Jean. They're one of my favorites. I've been listening to their newer material that, up until lately, I hadn't heard, and I've been enjoying it. I'd like to tell you a quick story about the first time I ever saw Norma Jean play. First time I'd ever heard of them. This was a few years ago, and my friend Ed and his son Michael had invited me to see one of my favorite bands called Animals as Leaders at the Summer Slaughter Tour at their stop in Detroit. A bunch of cool names there, I know. So we get over to Detroit, we pile in the car, we get to the venue, right? Things are cool. It's a sweet, old converted theater, some peeling paint, lots of character. Not, falling apart or anything, but it had character. It was perfect for this type of show. And when we arrived, it was in between two bands. So there's that anticipation, this electric feeling in the air. The amps are quietly hissing on stage. The crowd is buzzing. You can tell it's going to be awesome. But even just thinking about that feeling puts a smile on my face. So a few minutes go by. We're standing there. We're kind of in the middle of the room, sort of towards the back. A good, healthy crowd in front, and a fair amount of people behind us. Now, before I get to the next part of the story, there are three important details. The first, I'm not a very big person. The second, I'm not a big fan of being involved in a mosh pit. And for the uninitiated, a mosh pit is a staple at a hardcore show where the youths, sort of in the front, run around, shoving each other, get pretty physical. It's like a human hurricane. It's part of the fun, part of the experience. I just don't enjoy doing it. And the third detail, Ed and his son Michael are both built like trees. They're big, strong dudes. With me so far? The lights go, the amps crank up, and this band walks on stage, and Buddy says, "Hello, Detroit, we are Norma Jean, 1, 2, 3, 4, and drops into perhaps the loudest set I've heard in my life. Oh my gosh, I'm pretty sure people back in Windsor could have heard them playing. It was crazy, but it was awesome. So tight, musically, everything. I fell in love with their lyrics, immediately. Like I said, they're one of my favorite bands now. But a few songs into the set, and the mosh pit in front of us really started to open and go crazy. It got quite tumultuous. As the show progressed, the people who were in front of us started getting pushed back into us, and eventually were sucked into this vortex of mosh pit. Now, like I said, this is not something I have any interest in doing at all. And so as people started getting pushed and shoved into me and I'm getting jostled around a bit, I kind of poke Ed and gesture because there's no way we could hear each other speak. This is too close for comfort, you know. And Ed, cool as a cucumber, looks down at me and he nods. Yep, no problem. So the pit continues. I get shoved a couple times, like directly, and Ed sees this. And it's the same guy. And I don't think the guy was being malicious. He just, you know, was having fun and wanted me to participate, which I just didn't want to do. And I would kind of gently shove him off and kind of wave like, no thanks, no thanks. But he kept coming back for more. And so after maybe the third or fourth time, Ed steps in between this guy and me and shoves the guy so fast. I've never seen somebody fly backwards that quickly before. Not violent, just, you know, he's a big, strong dude. So Buddy goes flying, lost into the pit. The song ends. People are cheering and stuff. He comes back out of the pit, and I'm thinking, oh, man, we're going to have an altercation. This is bad news. But nope. He comes right up to me. He comes right up to Ed. He sticks his hand out. He says, guys, I'm really sorry. I wasn't trying to be aggressive or aggravate you. Was just, having fun. And then Ed just goes, yeah, no problem. We just don't want to play. All respectful, all above board, super cool. Norma Jean. That's my little story for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great week. I'm Cameron. This is The Starving Artist. Until next time.
We love our listeners, and it's great that you could join us. We could use your help. How? Listen to our episodes, subscribe to us, and rate us on your favorite podcast platform. Follow us on Instagram at lets.be.well.together. And make sure you tell your friends about us.
Move that body like we're meant to do. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Sheila, and I'm with my sister, Laurie, today.
Hi.
And we are going to be talking about walking because Laurie likes to do morning walks.
I love my morning walk with my dog.
Yeah, so it's not really optional for her because that's her job in the morning to take her dogs for a walk.
That's right.
But she really enjoys going out there. And how early in the morning do you go?
Between 5:30 and 6.
And how long do you go for?
20 to 30 minutes, depending on what time I have to get to work.
Okay.
Yeah.
Between 5:30 and 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
So often dark.
Yeah, it's usually dark. Yeah. It's been lighter recently.
Yeah.
I don't have a choice, not because I have to walk the dogs in the family, but because the dogs know this is my walk time and they won't let me sit down until we go for a walk.
Right.
So
do they wake you up in the morning?
No, but they hear me wake up and then they wait at the stairs while I shower, get dressed, and they know the routine that I go through. So
Right.
then they follow me through to the door. And if I go do something else in the morning and not walk them, it's very sad. It breaks my heart. So
The looks on their face.
yeah, so I just do it. If I have to get up earlier, I just do it.
And
Morning
do you
walk.
always do the same walk?
Yeah.
And where do you go?
So I go down the street to the park,
Yeah.
and then I let her off the leash in the park. And she runs through the park, finds a couple balls. We hope we don't find a skunk.
Mm-hmm.
And then we throw the ball for a bit, and then we're home.
You walk
After
home.
that,
And
walk
have you
back.
found a skunk?
Well, close. She's only been sprayed twice.
Only been sprayed twice. Once is enough. Oh my goodness.
So now when she sees a skunk, she freezes
Oh, good for her.
because she knows. So then I go, come here. As soon as I see her do that freeze, I know there's a skunk nearby. And we walk the other way.
Yeah, skunks. Oh my goodness. So, and anything else that you've seen in your morning walks?
Yeah, so I've seen a lot of interesting things. So the other day, this is a funny story.
Yeah, so we're going to, instead of moving your body today, we're going to tell you funny stories while you're moving your body.
Yeah, and keep your eyes open because you never know what you're going to see.
You guys can send us in your funny stories.
So I'm walking down the street and it was early because I had to be to work early that day. So it was about 6 a.m.
Okay.
And the neighbor down the street, he often walks around without a shirt. Like that's in the winter. Like this man is very hot all the time, clearly. So that's fine. That's normal. We always see him walking around without a shirt. But this time I turned to my left and you're just looking around. I'm not purposely looking for people.
Because he's outside.
Yeah. He must have ran out to his car or maybe, I don't know, ran to put something in the recycling bin. I don't know. But he was naked. Absolutely.
No, not even shoes on? Like,
Absolutely naked. 100%. Full commando. So he did the 2 hands in front of his body, you know, just to cover the essentials. And I was grateful. And then I didn't say good morning. I just kept
Did he
walking.
walk backwards?
He just closed the door and stepped back in, like he was on his balcony, stepped back in the door and closed the door. So maybe, yeah, he felt like he had to get something out before he put his shorts on that morning.
He felt like this had to go out to the recycling before he put clothes on.
Yeah. So you never know what you're going to see, but also people that are in your house and thinking of running out, you never know who might be walking their dog.
That's right. Or who's walking around, or who's just looking out the window. Like, there's a lot of people out there. You should, like, I go out in my pajamas a lot.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, I see people in their pajamas a lot.
And I'm like, I'm in my pajamas. That's no big deal. Everything's covered. Like,
yeah. And I'm kind of jealous.
Yeah.
When I see people in their pajamas, I'm like,
oh, you'd like to be in your pajamas.
Yeah, I've got my makeup on already, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I don't mind seeing people in their pajamas at all. I think that's high five.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we've definitely seen that. We've seen, a lot of bunnies and the odd raccoon. But skunks, lately there's been more skunks.
We had some foxes in our backyard.
Oh.
Yeah, so our 2 houses over, they had the babies were under their porch or something.
Yeah.
So we saw the foxes back and forth, and I loved seeing the foxes. Haven't seen them in a while, so they must have grown and moved on.
Found a new spot.
Yeah.
Yeah. Better food.
Yeah. Yeah. But you like going for your morning walk.
I do. I see the sunrise. Doesn't matter, snow, rain. Every day we walk.
No, it's
regardless.
great. Yeah, it's great to get out there in nature and walk.
Yeah. Weather is weather.
There's a thought. Popped up while running. Intellectual. Without a T. Sammy and I recently talked about intellectual wellness in the context of not so much being brainy and smart, but exercising our minds. And that's something we all do. But there is a funny story about my book and the word intellectual. Here I am trying to explain these different categories. So there's a couple sides to this. First of all, recently I got really lucky and I got interviewed on the radio about the book and podcast. And at one point I was asked what the 8 categories of wellness are. And I can never just remember and list them off the top of my head, which is everyone thinks is kind of odd because, I should know it all because I've, look at the logo, look at the book, look at the podcast. But the bottom line is, I probably could name them all, but if you just asked me on the spot, I'd be hard pressed to go through them all in order. I don't have a great memory that way. So that was a bit embarrassing. And there was almost even more major embarrassment with my book because I was working with a publisher and an editor and proofreaders, and they did fantastic work. But the one thing they left for me was the covers, to deal with the covers. Now they did some design and I really appreciate the work that they did on the design. But I said, hey, I want to include my logo, my pinwheel logo on the back cover to show the 8 areas of wellness that I'm exploring. And they're like, great, no problem. Send us a picture. So I sent a picture and they put it on the drafts and I kept checking the drafts. Well, can you believe it? I spelled intellectual without a T. And their job wasn't to do the spell check of my photos. They would spell check all the text. And somehow, no matter, even though I probably reviewed it like 5, 6, 7 times, I never noticed that missing T until the very last edit. And I'm like, holy cow. So except that I noticed that on the last edit, and I'm not even sure why, in the photo, I almost put out a book trying to explain how being intellectual is really important, having misspelled intellectual, which probably wouldn't have come across very well. And not very intellectual. And in retrospect, it makes me laugh. It's me. Am I?
Yeah. Just let me say, flip side of the coin.
When it comes to social wellness, we should all just get along, right? We should all be nice to each other, right?
Yes, we should all be nice.
That doesn't happen. not even in the friendly world of let's be well together. Because, it's ironic because you get mad at people who don't exercise social wellness, right?
Yeah.
We're being anti-social, but you know what? That's just life because oblivious people really
that's
bother
crazy.
me.
Oh, it drives me bonkers.
Yeah. So this came up the other day. We were thinking about this because of something the other day where we're driving along a local street and we get stopped at a red light and there's a mall to our right. So the people coming out of the mall, and it's one of those lights where the people coming out of the mall who have to turn left, they have a really short light.
Yes.
So, they're lucky to get 5 or 6 cars through, even if they start right at the start.
Right.
So what happened?
Well, this lady with her dog, and it was a little dog, so it's walking slow, was walking really slowly.
She was actually carrying it.
She was carrying the dog. So, but she was walking ridiculously slow and kind of looking around, and like it looked like she was looking around and smelling the roses or something, like just totally oblivious. And I think only one car got through and barely behind her. And I was like, wow, that lady is so oblivious. Because I'm sure if I went up to her and said, hey, like, can you walk a little faster? And she'd be like, oh, I'm sorry. I had no idea that cars were going by. Or, like they're usually really nice, but they're just unaware. And that's so frustrating.
But that's the problem. And like, I don't know. I'm not going to try and spin it as part of our whole podcast discussion, but I think you could by starting to go down the road saying, as part of social wellness, you've got to be aware of the people around you. You've got to be aware of the circumstances that you're in. And it's not about being politically correct or being whatever you want to label it. It's just common sense.
Yeah,
you're going to frustrate people
that say, share the road, and there's a bike and there's a walker. And like, it's like, share the road, people. Like, it bothers me when pedestrians think that it says I can walk. I can walk however I want to walk, take my time.
So I have a problem a lot of times when I'm out for my jogs on trails, because a couple different variations happen. One, people are walking dogs and they have a long leash, and I'm coming up behind them and I'm obviously going to pass them, and there's nowhere for me to go. Mm-hmm. And, just to complain for a second, there's a lot of times where I'm on a really long run. I'm really tired. And as stupid as this might sound, even having to go a few steps to the left extra, pass somebody and go a few steps to the right, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard mentally. It's hard physically. It shouldn't be, but it is. So I'm like, oh man. So, and the other variation is people who are together, they're talking and they take the entire path.
Well, I love the people who have their dog off a leash and they're walking going, oh, well, no, my dog's good.
Yeah. Everybody whose dog is off a leash is special.
Yeah. My dog listens. My dog. And it's like when I'm running, that dog's going to chase me, or I just don't want that anxiety of having to worry about, slowing down or, making sure the dog's aware that I'm not running away from it or something.
And this happens when we're biking a lot too. Like,
yes.
We're biking and we run into so you have to ring the bell and then it scares them. But again, like, first of all, over 90% of the people on the paths don't do this.
Right.
Over 90% of the people with dogs are great.
But the thing that bothers me is that, like, if they could just listen, like, don't have headphones on when you're walking on a path, or because if you're listening, you'll hear the bike behind you. Like, I can understand you can't see what's going on behind you, but you can hear. I can hear a bike coming up behind me when I'm biking. I can hear things. So just listen and then try and look at least, or be aware. Because to me, when I have to ring my bell, your bell's really cute. It's just ding, ding. Mine's
it's
like,
pretty bad.
Yeah, it's Alex says it's like dinner's up, ding.
Yeah.
But my bell is like a ding, ding, and it's like rude almost.
Yeah, it sounds, especially the way you do it, it's aggressive. Like, get out of the way.
Yeah, because I don't want left.
Well, I mean, I think you have a choice. If you want to wear headphones, because I wear headphones when I run, but when I run, I stay on the right side of the path. So any biker or any pedestrian can pass me. If I'm moving out, I look behind me first to make sure there's nobody coming up. And so you have a choice. You can either keep yourself in a position where you're not hogging the entire path, and then you can just be on your merry way. Or if you're hogging the path, just keep looking over your shoulder every couple of minutes just to make sure that you're not blocking bikers or joggers or anyone else.
You wear headphones that don't go over your ears.
Yeah, but I don't hear people coming up behind me.
Wow.
I don't hear bikes.
No? It just scares me when people wear headphones because they can't hear what's going on around them.
Yeah, well, I don't have an issue with that because I wear headphones and I'm careful, and I assume a lot of other people are too.
Well, what about people with music? Like no headphones, they just have the music on and you're going through nature. And
a couple of weeks ago, we're out for a nice walk. It's on a nature path. We're looking at the water,
listening to the birds.
And somebody comes walking the other way with literally, what do you call
Ghetto.
those? A ghetto blaster. For like when I was a kid, we all had ghetto
Over
blasters.
their shoulder.
That's how old I am. We all had ghetto blasters, and it was a really big deal which one you got. And but now we all have iPods or phones, that ages me too. Nobody has iPods, but we listen to music on our phones and we have headphones. And I get that if you're at a picnic table with a family, you want to put on your music, go for it. But if you're walking down a quiet path with a ghetto blaster,
So oblivious.
you're a goofball.
Okay, well, another thing that bothers me is when I'm driving and someone's in the fast lane going 80 in a 100 zone or going 99 in a 100 zone. Like, it's like,
Oh yeah, you were saying that you were a passenger one time and you were embarrassed.
well, the problem, it's just they're oblivious. I don't understand what's going on. Like, because cars are like zigzagging through the lanes to get past them, right? Because sometimes
but just
it's
for
hard.
context in the situation, you were on a expressway with a 90 kilometer an hour speed limit,
And I wasn't driving.
and somebody was in the fast lane,
So we were going 80 in a 90.
and it was the fast lane.
And it was the fast lane. And at least 10 cars went around us. And I could see, them kind of riding you and riding. And so at one point I did say, maybe you should move over. We're not really going that fast. And he's like, oh, I'm good here.
Yeah, it's just, like, think about it. You're driving on an expressway or a highway. If you're not passing in the outside lane, why are you there?
Right.
You don't need to be in the outside lane if you're not passing, or if at least carrying on at the same speed as everybody in that outside lane. I'm not at all saying people should speed. I'm not saying anything like that, but
No, just go.
there's no reason to be going 80. And because you know what, like, you might think it's no big deal, but you're actually causing frustration. You're actually ruining people's time.
Yeah, which is what we're talking about. Oblivious people, it really does add frustration and anxiety to other people's lives. So
Yeah,
if you could
this is-
just not be oblivious, that would be great.
This is just a gripe session, and guess what? We're going to do it often, because if there's one thing that gets under my skin, it's oblivious people who just don't have the courtesy to pay attention to the surrounding they're in, pay attention to the people around them, and just carry on in ways that frustrate everyone unfairly. Please remember that we're not providing advice. We hope to inspire you to work towards balance, and we urge you to consult with qualified people if you need advice. The people on the show are speaking in their personal capacities. Their views expressed are their own, and don't represent the views or opinions of their outside contacts, their employers, or anyone else. We try to get things right, but we can't guarantee everything we say is correct, or that the things we talk about will work for you. Let's be well together, and let's be sure to do that in a safe way. It is sign-off time, and it's sign-off time on a long weekend in Canada.
Yes, Labor Day weekend.
And that means a lot of people are away, so Sheila and I, it's just the two of us for sign-off today.
Yeah.
And we've had a great weekend.
Busy.
It's been enjoyable,
Yeah.
but we got a lot done too.
Yeah, because we did not go anywhere this weekend, and neither one of us had any prior commitments, so we got to do things.
Yeah, it was fun. So what
Yeah.
about last week? What's going on with you right now?
Well, I got to the gym, so I was really happy about that this week. And I went out with one of my students, well, two of my students actually, on Thursday night. So that was really nice to catch up with them. And
You mean former students?
sorry, yes, former students. I consider them all still my students. And they're off to university, and it seems like all the kids are getting ready to go off to school. So that's always fun. And I start to work again tomorrow.
Yeah,
So,
you've been working a lot. So
yeah, I'll be working until we go to England.
yeah, we actually have to plan that trip. We have lots of people send us lots of great ideas. And every weekend, including this past weekend, we're like, hey, we got to find time to do an itinerary, but we never actually done anything yet.
No, I don't know why we keep procrastinating. we
better
really got to get that going, or we'll be on our trip, like flying, trying to figure out what we're going to do for the week.
Yeah, on the
Or
airplane.
yeah.
I always, whenever I fly, well, I mean, whenever I've flown to Europe one time, and I thought I would sleep on the way over because it was kind of a red eye type flight, which we're doing again, but I can't sleep.
I never can sleep. Every single flight that I've gone on.
Really?
Yes.
Strange.
Like 15-hour flight. And then as soon as I get off the plane, like, because the one time I had to go to Korea, but I stopped in Japan and then went to Changwon. And there was a layover like 3 hours, and I got off the plane and I just fell asleep.
When you got off the
Yeah.
plane. So, got anything else going on?
No.
Okay. Well, I had just kind of a regular week. I was working and of course, I'm getting closer to the run. I was being a little bit anxious because with these little injuries and whatnot, I keep worrying about getting the long runs done. I've been struggling to get the full distances in, but I'm doing them. It's hard. This weekend was great because finally it was a Sunday morning when it wasn't hot.
Yeah.
And not only wasn't it hot when I started, but it didn't get hot when I was going, and my body seemed to like that.
Yeah.
So with any luck, on October 2nd, I think it is, in England, it's not going to be hot. It's going to be nice and cool with luck.
Hopefully, and not humid.
Yeah, and I'll get that one done.
Yeah.
So another busy,
hoping.
Yeah, busy work week, more training. Mental note, we got to schedule things to do in England.
Okay, got it.
And we'll see everybody next week.
That is it for today's show. Please try and make wellness a priority.
You deserve it.
If you feel the need to talk to someone or ask for help, please do that.
Accept yourself for the person you are.
So long.
Adieu.
Auf Wiedersehen.
Goodbye.